Well, for more, we can bring in climate scientist Jean-Pascal van Ypersele, who's a professor at the Catholic University of Leuven, and he's also a visiting professor at the University of Liège. Thank you very much for speaking to us here on France 24 today. Now, we're currently experiencing what scientists are already calling the most severe heatwave ever recorded in Europe, with high temperature records seemingly broken every day. Is this the new normal that we're simply just going to have to get used to?
Unfortunately, this is not the new normal. This might be considered in a few decades from now as a cool period, because if we continue to increase our greenhouse gas emissions in the world, particularly CO2 coming from the burning of fossil fuels, we will get even higher temperatures in the future.
So, to lead on from that, to what extent exactly, in your opinion, is human behaviour, man-made global warming, responsible for the sorts of extreme weather we're experiencing right now?
Well, it's very clear that we wouldn't get values of temperature as high as the one we are seeing, and heat waves as long as what we are seeing now, if we had not disturbed the climate system with our greenhouse gas emissions. So clearly, this is an effect of human influence on the climate.
Do we have any idea about the extent to which global warming is impacting these sorts of extreme weather events? Do we have an idea about how much less hot it would be, for example, if we hadn't been pumping greenhouse gases into the atmosphere since the Industrial Revolution?
Well, the average global temperature has already increased since the Industrial Revolution by approximately 1.3 degrees Celsius. But in Europe, the increase has been larger than the global average. First of all, because if it's a continent, and continents warm faster and more than the global average, because the ocean is warming in a slower manner. And so it would, I would say, between 2 and 2.5 degrees, something like that. It would be 2 or 2.5 degrees on average colder than it is now. And the extremes would not be as high as what they are now.
Now, a few years ago, we were talking pretty much non-stop about the 1.5 degree Celsius Paris target, the goal of keeping global warming to no more than 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Where are we right now regarding that target? And you touched on it just there, but is that different for Europe compared to the rest of the world?
Well, this number is, first of all, a global average temperature number. So it's what the Paris Agreement says is that we should do everything possible to stay below a 1.5 degrees C warming above the pre-industrial temperature on a global average basis, and also on a climate basis. A climate basis, that means that it's on an average of 10 to 20 years at least. And we are now already on a particular year basis at 1.3 degrees Celsius above the average. We have not yet reached the 1.5 degrees C average limit, but we are not far from it, and probably we will cross that threshold from a climate point of view in the coming 10 years or so. So we have not done enough, clearly, to achieve the Paris Agreement goal up to now. But the future is still in our hands. We can still reduce emissions in order to avoid much higher temperature even, which would lead to even higher extremes with even more casualties and death.
And can we just talk about what is predicted to happen if we do surpass that threshold, as it looks like we are going to, of 1.5 degrees warming? What does that mean for the planet? What does it mean for natural habitats, ecosystems, our comfort when it comes to things like the heat wave we're currently experiencing?
Well, the IPCC has written an entire special report about this question in 2018, and it clarified that the threshold is not a border beyond which everything becomes black and under which everything is white. It's something that is progressive, that is progressing slowly. But what is very clear is that beyond 1.5, a number of ecosystems would have a very hard time to resist. For example, corals, tropical corals, beyond 1.5 or somewhere between 1.5 and 2 degrees C above the pre-industrial temperature, would, most of them, disappear, for example, become extinct. But the effect in terms of frequency and intensity of extreme events such as heat waves, wildfires, drought in certain area, floods in other area, because when the climate is warming, there's more water vapor in the atmosphere and more intense rainfall becomes possible. All of those increase very significantly. And the frequency of those extreme events increases very significantly. It's even multiplied by factors between 1 and 10 for some certain phenomena if we go beyond 1.5 degrees C warming. But of course, it's not a black and white thing. And every 10th of a degree of warming that we can avoid, even if we go above 1.5 degrees C, is welcome to decrease the severity of the impacts.
Let's talk briefly about net zero goals, net zero by 2050 being a framework set out by the IEA, the International Energy Agency, to help limit warming to 1.5 degrees warming globally. Is that, in 2026, is that a credible target, or has it rather quietly become something of a diplomatic fiction?
Well, one should distinguish the laws of physics and the laws of politics, or the political point of view. The fact is that if we want to stabilize the warming at or below 1.5 degrees C, we need to have global emissions to reach the neutrality. That's the famous net zero. It simply means not emitting globally more CO2 that what natural systems, the ocean, the forest, the soils, can absorb. And if we don't reach that in that level in 2050, well, it means that the stabilization the stabilization level at which temperature will arrive will be higher. So if we stabilize and if we reach net zero in 2050, we would stabilize the temperature at 1.5. If we procrastinate and reach that level globally only in 2070, for example, 20 years later, we would then reach +2 degrees C globally. I mean, it's as simple as that. So the earlier we reach net zero, the better. Now, whether it's possible or not, it's not a scientific question. It's a political question, and it's mostly a question of political will, because the IPCC has been very clear in its last report. It is possible, with all the technologies, with all the knowledge we have about how to reduce emissions, it is possible to reach the net zero level in 2050. But we need to want that more than we do up to now to reach that.
Jean-Pascal van Ypersele, professor at the Catholic University of Leuven and also visiting professor at the University of Liège. Thank you very much for speaking to us here on Around the World today.
You're most welcome.